I'm Jono Buchanan, and in this video we're going to take a look at a unique little feature of Ultrabeat in its LFO section. Unlike most synthesizers, what the LFOs in Ultrabeat can do is to allow you to configure a low frequency oscillator shape, but to have it only play as many times as you like before it stops. And that's a really interesting little addition from a sound design point of view in terms of being able to make really interesting electronic drum sounds. Let me show you what I mean. So what I've done is I've opened up Ultrabeat, created a new instrument, and I've selected the Vintage 08 kit. And what I'm going to do is just program a pattern region for it. So a little 4-bar sequence, and we'll do this nice and quickly and just create sort of snare and clap combination on beat 2. And we'll put in some hats as well, just playing on the downbeats. Okay, so this is going to be our sequence. Now, what I want to do within Ultrabeat is to focus on just the kick drum for a moment. So the kick drum's down here. It's the currently selected sound. To select any individual voice or drum within Ultrabeat, all I need to do is to click on it. And as I do that, you can see the assorted parameters that make up any sound are displayed. So here is our kick drum. Now, the LFO section is up here in the top right-hand corner, and there are two LFOs, 1 and 2. And we're going to focus on LFO 1, although they behave in exactly the same way. So what I can do with a low frequency oscillator is that I can interrupt any parameter that I like. What I mean by interrupt is that effectively I can take control of a parameter, say for example, the pitch of the oscillator that's playing this kick drum, and I can interrupt it with a waveform which is going to change it in some way. So what I'm going to do is to swap the envelope 1 routing here for the LFO instead. Now what that now means is that the pitch of this voice is going to be controlled by LFO 1. Over here at LFO 1, I get to determine a few things. Firstly, I get to choose the speed of that interruption. Now, I want this to be synced to the tempo of the project. So rather than a free undulating LFO, I'm going to press the sync button, and I'm going to select, I don't know, let's say a 16th note to start with so we can hear this really clearly. And then what I'm going to do is to make sure that I've got a waveform that I'm happy with as well. By default, this sine wave is available to me, but as I move this slider along, I'm in a position to choose a shape that I might want to use. Let's go with a square wave for a moment. So what I've done so far is to sync the LFO to tempo. I've selected the area where I want the LFO to work its magic, which is on the pitch of the oscillator that's playing this kick drum sound. And what this should mean now is that we've got pitch variation on that particular voice. Let's just solo it. The perfect kick drum. Available in all electronic dance records wherever you like. Okay, so why is this so extreme? Well, because at the moment the range that the LFO is working over is enormous. I can see this enormous kind of pitch range. We've got a pitch that's now toggling between something like G5 and the actual low frequency of the main kick drum. So let's rein this in a lot so that we've got a much lower range sort of happening on this kick. Okay, and let's also just vary the shape that we're using as well. Okay, this is nice, this little random wave shape that I've got at the moment. So effectively what this is doing is producing these unexpected offsets in 16th notes to the pitch of the kick drum. But obviously at the moment, this is just happening every time the kick plays because we're not limiting the number of times it can possibly happen. Now I'm going to do a couple of things. Firstly, I'm going to speed up the rate. I'm going to take it up to, let's say 1/32, which is now twice the speed of a 16th note. Okay, so it's much faster, but it's still completely random and it's all the time. Now then, at the moment, the reason for that is because the cycles, which is over here on the right-hand side, is set to an infinite number, which means that it's never going to stop producing the cyclical waveform of this LFO. but what I can actually do is to limit the number of cycles that play. Now, that's not going to get particularly interesting until I make it a really small number, because even 20 cycles would be an awful lot. It will happen 20 times before the sound decides to rest. But if I set it at, let's just say 2, for instance, what we're starting to get is much less variation. Now, let's hear that with a more regular wave. Okay, so what we've now got is a 1/64th note, which is really fast, and we've got 4 cycles happening before the sound then sort of selects its main pitch. So we've got this little sort of flutter of variation. Let's just put that in with the pattern for a moment. And what that's doing is just giving us this slight variation to the kick drum. Now let's see what we can do with the snare drum. If I select it over here, and I'm just going to solo it as well, so that the sound is just playing back by itself, what I can see straight away is that unlike the kick, the snare drum is made from 3 separate elements. We've got oscillator 1, oscillator 2, and a noise generator, all of which are on. I can see the power lights are playing for all of them. So I am going to modify the pitch of the first oscillator, but that probably won't be enough for us to really hear the effect that the LFO is going to have. What I'm going to do firstly is to choose the LFO speed that I want. I'm going to start with a sort of down ramp, and what I'm going to do is to choose a sort of 32th note, 1/32, and I'm going to limit the cycles to, let's say, 3, so I can begin to just hear a little sort of smattering of some sort of modulation routing before the sound then settles. Okay, so I am going to start with LFO 1 again in the pitch area here, and I can set the range. But I suspect that if I press play, we'll only hear a very subtle difference because the noise generator hasn't been in any way changed, and nor has oscillator 2. Let's turn those off for a moment. Okay, and we're just hearing that little sort of blast of pitch change on the very beginning of that note, but it's pretty subtle because it's only one part of the sort of the pie, if you like, of this sound. So what I'm going to do is bring in the noise generator. I'm going to change the LFO1 routing here as well on the filter cutoff for this sound, and I'm going to set that over a nice wide range. And I'm also going to apply exactly the same LFO to the overall volume of the noise generator as well. So what that's now going to do is to make this shape change the volume of the sound, but only for 3 cycles before it then settles. And I'm going to bring in the third oscillator. Again, I'm going to choose LFO1. Again, I'm going to modify the pitch. And we can just go through adding different parameters wherever we like. I could take the overall filter for this sound, and again I could modify it based on that LFO routing so that effectively the brightness of the overall sound is changing for just 3 cycles of whatever shape I select here. So by changing the rate, you can hear the effect of that shape over a longer period of time. So we get this kind of weird little pitch splurge on that note. Now again, to hear it a bit more dramatically, what I'm going to do is to solo this sound. I'm going to come to the amplifier envelope and I'm going to make the note a bit longer. Okay, now we can hear this very clearly. We've got 3 cycles to this note. If I make this a 1 cycle note, or 2. We can hear it happen and then settle. What happens now if we speed it back up to 8ths? Okay, so what we've done now is to create the kind of really weird, wonky kind of snare where we've got this little fluctuation that's happening underneath this kind of static clap that's happening at the same time. And obviously we've done some interesting work to the kick drum as well. Now what I'm doing here in terms of just trying different things out is modifying rates, modifying the number of cycles, and changing the envelope for shape, which is routed through to the amplifier. So that's controlling the overall length of this snare drum. But the crucial thing here is our cycles number. The ability to create an LFO, route it into something, but have that shape only last for a certain number of cycles before it stops is pretty unique. Can't really think of too many synthesizers that let you do that, and particularly aligned to drum sound so that we can produce these little blasts of variation before a drum sound then just settles down. I think is a really interesting way of kind of sound designing drums.